Hey, folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast, a podcast focused on product stories, product storytellers, interesting brand ambassadors, and any other tangent that I happen to come up with. Whether you're a bourbon fan, a geek, a casual observer, or someone just floating through this channel, I hope you find it interesting. And if you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully, I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll try to get that taken care of. I also generally live stream the recording of these episodes on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at EmbellishPod or Twitter with the exact same handle. I have a pet website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's also a place to pick up these links, episode details, and even more. Today is June the 9th, 2022, and we are talking with Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and we have Jenna joining us. And I'll say, before we get kind of started on this, anecdotally, I had a friend that I had spent a fun whiskey weekend with, and he saw that I was doing this, and he was like, "Hey, who's going to be talking to you? Who you're interviewing?" And I said it was Jenna, and he said he related a story of whenever he first joined Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, he won a lottery and was super excited to be able to have a conversation with Jenna specifically because your start in the industry. I guess industry, that's such a weird term to use, right? But
It is,
your start
yeah.
in this journey, I guess,
Yeah,
was from Instagram, right? And so
it
you have
was.
you have a previous handle here.
I do. And it's still active and live and still, sharing all things whiskey. But yeah, that's how I ended up here in this crazy world of whiskey. So,
Right. That's
yeah.
he was super pumped about it. He was like, "Oh, this is awesome." So I reached out to you. I was like, "Hey, I don't know a ton about Scotch, and it's one of those segments that I want to get into and I want to know more about." And about a year and a half ago, I actually joined Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. There was another channel that I follow. They were doing a promotion where they got a discounted joining rate or something along that lines. I was like, I'll give it a shot. I'll join. I joined. And then I used the difference between my joining rate and what it would have been and what I paid and bought some bottles to try out. And I really appreciate the structure of what you guys have. And when I asked you to come on, I didn't expect anything to show up, but you sent me a few things. And
Did.
so we're gonna taste some stuff. We're gonna talk about what those are. But if you want to talk about what you sent me and which one should I start with, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So what we sent to you were two US exclusive casks, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means as we kind of dig into them. But the first one that we're going to taste is cask 35.302, a quick-witted dovetail. And this is a 14-year Speyside. I spent 12 years in ex-bourbon hogshead, and then the remaining 2 years in a first fill ex-Pedro Jimenez shave, toasted, and recharred barrique. That is a mouthful, much like the
There,
whiskey.
yeah, there's a ton of stuff that's happening in that. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit on these labels is just this incredible amount of information, and kind of reading through that, starting with the cask number. That's what you told me to start with. You got this number that's 35.302. Like, what does this mean?
Yeah, so I guess for those of you, those of you who are listening who aren't familiar with who the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society is, so essentially we're the world's largest whiskey club, and what we do is we bottle single malt, single cask Scotch whiskey from over 150 different distilleries around the world. But also from time to time, you'll see a single cask, rum or cognac, armagnac, a gin. So we do other spirits as well. And you'll also see a single cask bourbon or a single barrel bourbon, I guess they call it in the bourbon world, or a single cask rye, American single malt. We've bottled a single cask from Japan, Sweden, Taiwan, Australia, um, England, Ireland. I know I'm missing some in there, but you get the
Mhm.
gist. So really, our mission is to hunt down these, incredible single cask of whiskey wherever in the world they, happen to be, and bring them and bottle them exclusively for our members. And so our bottles aren't found in liquor stores or, anything like that. It's strictly through being a member of the society and through our website. So the two that I have sent you today are two Speyside distilleries. And the first one that actually, these two distilleries I love personally so much. And I actually found my love of these distilleries through the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. So I'm very excited to talk about them and dig a little bit into them because, single cask whiskey and spirits are just so special. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that all whiskey isn't special. Of course it is. Blended
Right.
whiskeys are special. Whiskeys that, just single malt whiskeys are special. They really are. Whiskey in general is a very magical thing, but there is something just very different and exciting and just, so just beautiful about a single cask of anything, whether it is a bourbon, a rye, a scotch, whatever the case is. So,
Yeah. I think single
um,
casks have a little bit of extra. Single casks, single barrels, single whatever containers.
right.
They have a little bit of extra magic to them because blending whiskey specifically is an art form, right? It's not an art
Heck
form
yes.
that's necessarily like bourbon hasn't bought into this yet, right? Like you use the term blending and people start getting a little upset because they're reminiscent to blended whiskey of the 70s and 80s, which was a different creature. But within Scotch, at least my understanding of the Scotch industry, like the master blender is on equal, if not higher esteem than a master distiller is because they're crafting a flavor profile.
It is, and it is so incredibly difficult to and to keep a consistent
Hmm.
flavor profile across the board. If you are responsible for making sure that every bottle of Glenfiddich, 12 year that hits the shelf tastes exactly the same no matter where you buy it, whether you're in Paris or Hong Kong or in Murray, Kentucky, every time you buy that bottle of whiskey, it's going to taste exactly the same. Like that's a lot of
Hmm.
pressure for one. And you really do have to have just such a fine-tuned,
Hmm.
mind and palate and sensory system to be able to pull that off. And it
Right.
is incredibly difficult. And I give so much respect to, the people out there who are doing that because it is not easy.
Right. But and part of their art form is being able to identify that, this cask may be slightly short on finish, while the next cask has a really strong finish, but it's weak on the front end. And so they're putting those together. But for single
Yeah.
casks, you have to identify unique barrels or casks that do all of the things with nothing to help them out. Right. And so as it comes out of the barrel, that's where that sort of like magic feeling for me comes from, is that you don't get to do it. You might add water to it if for some people
Yeah.
who want to proof it down, but that's it. That's the only option that you have, is taking that, and you may put it in another cast, but you don't get to blend it with something else to
Nope.
accentuate it, to hide it, to do anything different with it. And I like that. I mean, you see that in the bourbon industry, everybody's going after single barrels because it's a way to take a standard shelf offering and make it unique. My dad was making beer, 30 years ago, whenever the home brewing trend hit the top, and he was
Yeah.
always a big proponent of the folks at Coors or Anheuser-Busch. Maybe their beer is not exactly what he was after, but you could buy a case of it today and you could buy a case of it 10 years from now and it tastes the same. And that's an
Yep.
incredible art form. And that's what blenders do. But that's also sort of the beauty of these single casks, is that everyone's sort of different, right? And so now you're trying to collect them all.
Yeah. And that's what I think is so special about, what we do is, we're bottling from distilleries that will never release a house whiskey of their own or a portfolio of their own. A lot of these
Mhm.
distilleries are blend houses, and actually the second whiskey we're going to taste, that is a great example. That particular distillery, they create a whiskey for blends. They create
Mhm.
whiskey for I believe it's the 100 Pipers blend that particular whiskey goes into. But, so to be able to taste these distilleries that you would never have a chance to taste otherwise and in single cask form is really,
Mhm.
really cool to me. And, I was a member of the society before I was part of the team. And I remember this just opened up like a whole world of whiskey to me that I don't think that I would have ever been exposed to otherwise, because a lot of these distilleries you'll never see in a liquor store or
Mhm.
on a shelf somewhere. And if you do, you've probably never heard of it. And, you're like, well, I don't know what that is. I don't want to drink it.
Mhm.
Like, was this made in a shed in the back of, someone's yard or something? I don't know if I want to drink that.
Right.
So it's a pretty cool little thing.
Yeah. So what should I be tasting here? So in this
All
this
right.
barrel 14, you have the notes on the bottle itself, right?
Yes. So,
Someone has taken the time to write those, but maybe you've got some more.
yeah, so I want to I'll break down the label and the tasting notes and all of that good stuff, but I do just want to preface it by saying that what you should be smelling is what your mind is telling you you should be
Right.
smelling. Like when it comes to nosing and tasting whiskey, it's so easy to like put our noses in the air and stick our pinkies out and say, oh, you should get fine mahogany on this, and it
Hmm.
should smell of Ron Burgundy's ass, and all of these great things, right? And that's not the case. Like whatever I smell is right, and whatever you smell is right. Whatever, our neighbor who is drinking the same whiskey is smelling is right too.
Hmm.
So, just kind of let your mind be free, and you can spew out whatever it is that's coming to your mind when it comes to nosing and tasting this. But so let me break down the label really quick. So I don't know, my camera is probably not as good
Yep.
as yours,
No,
but
we're
I'm going
good.
to try here. All right, so we do not put distillery names on our bottles, and I'll talk about that too because it is important. So instead we use it, there we go, we use a coding system. So right here you will see Society Cask number 35.302. The 35 refers to the distillery that this whiskey comes from, and the 302 refers to the amount of cask that we have bottled from this distillery. You will also see here the outturn. This is going to tell you how many bottles came out of that cask. So only 206 bottles, and that's all 206 came here to the US. This is a full US exclusive cask. And we give it a fun kind of cheeky name and some fun cheeky tasting notes, and we'll definitely talk about those. You also have the age of the whiskey, the date it was distilled, the region it's from, and then the types of cask, if it's just a single cask or one cask, or if it was in two different types of cask. All of that information will be on the label. And then lastly, you have the ABV over here in the
Hmm.
corner. So why are there no distillery names on bottles? Oop, let's see if I can get my camera to focus out again. Let's try it. All right, well.
It'll get there eventually.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right, well, so why are there no distillery names on our bottles? So, there are a few different reasons, but I think the two most important reasons are, one, out of respect for these distilleries. And what I mean by
Hmm.
that is there are going to be times that we are releasing single cask are just wildly different from, or
Right.
wildly different from a house style anyway. You know, and the other part of that is that we are also releasing whiskey that is not indicative of a lot of distilleries' house styles. We have released peated whiskeys from distilleries that have never touched peat,
Hmm.
which is kind of crazy. And I remember when I first saw this kind of coming down the line, I was like, let's see if I can get this camera focus.
Oh no, I think you're good now.
All right,
It's
we're
back
good.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I remember like reaching out to friends in the industry and being like, have you ever seen anything like this? Like, am I losing my mind? Like, did this happen and like nobody just talked about it?
Hmm.
And they were like, no, I've never seen this ever in the history of this particular distillery. So like a lot of times we're releasing things that are not indicative of a house style, and we never
Hmm.
want somebody to taste a single cask of anything and say, oh well, I don't like that, so I'm not going to ever try that distillery again.
Right.
Like what we want to do is we're not just promoting one brand or one distillery. We are promoting whiskey as a whole. We want people to go out and soak up as much knowledge as they can about the world of whiskey, not about just one particular brand or distillery. So that's one of the reasons. And then the flip side of that is because we don't want you to have a bias, right? We're
Hmm.
human, we all have them. And that's why all of our bottles are green. You can't see what the color of the whiskey
Yep.
is inside until you pour it into your glass, and by that time it's too late. And we want to just strip away of as much of that as we can, because our main focus at the society is flavor. And I know you and I talked a little bit about this before we jumped on, but we don't categorize our whiskeys on by distillery or region or what type of cask it was in or any of that. We strictly categorize our whiskeys based on flavor.
Hmm.
And that is our main focus, is to find the best, cask out there that are going to just provide a, roller coaster of flavor every time you sit back and enjoy it. And so that's kind of the flip side of why there are no distillery names
Yeah.
on the bottles. And
No,
instead we
and
use the
y-
coding system.
that's perfect, because so this is the scariest thing for whiskey nerds, is tasting anything blind, right? Because as soon as you
I
taste
love
something
it.
blind, well, I mean, so like I'm a huge Buffalo Trace fan. Everything they make is the best. And then you get in a blind and you rank your Buffalo Trace the lowest, and you put Heaven Hill at
Yes.
the top, or you end up,
Yes.
like David Nicholson Reserve, which is $19, is the best whiskey in that flight, and it
Yeah.
and it, it can prove you wrong about your preconceived notions. And so that's part of what I really enjoy about it. There's a couple companies out there doing, blind tasting kits that you can get, and you don't know what you're drinking. You have to
Yeah.
scan QR codes and learn about it. This, I think I prefer this to that because this is giving me some degree of information without telling me who it comes from. But for
Right.
myself, being a Scotch novice, the labels mean nothing to me right now, right? Because I don't know, I know who Ardbeg is and I know who Glenfiddich is,
Yeah.
but beyond that, beyond like the handful of like, 5 large distilleries that everybody always knows
Right.
that Scotch, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to me, but you can get lost in that. You're like, oh, well, do I like this distillery? Do I like that distillery or
Yeah.
what,
There,
It's good.
I was gonna, I don't know if I have my book on my desk. I was gonna recommend a great book to you, but I don't know if I have it on my desk at the moment. There's like whiskey all over the floor.
It happens that way. That's there may be
Yeah,
whiskey surrounding me as well. So
yeah,
I
there
understand
is a
that to a
book
degree.
in here somewhere. But this is really a really great way to learn about so many different
Mhm.
distilleries. And a lot of times these distilleries maybe are smaller and don't have like a Macallan budget to, go out
Right.
and to promote, or again, they're blend houses and they're just part of, some of the most famous blended whiskeys out there. But there is a great book called the Malt Whiskey Yearbook,
Mhm.
and every year they put out a new edition, by the year. And it is probably, I have never used a set of books so much. Like even in college, I didn't use, like, this is the ultimate textbook. And usually I have one on my desk,
Yeah.
and I don't have it on my desk at the moment.
So I'm
But
I'm a
yeah, it's
book
called the,
person. I'm a book
yeah,
person, so I'm already there. Like the
I'm the
whiskey
same
is
way.
above the sight line, but below that is all books. Like
Yep.
Monday night, I had an opportunity to do an interview with a female whiskey author that's had a book that released on Tuesday.
Mm,
She's a big Scotch fan as well, and so absolutely, I've got it on a post-it here. You don't have to show me anything else.
yep.
It'll Amazon
It's
to
great.
me and I'll have it or
There
wherever it
you
comes
go.
from.
And so what's great is that, again, we don't put distillery names on our bottles, but there are many lists out there. You could figure it out.
Mhm.
It's not
Right, right, but
a
it's not
big
staring in
secret.
the face,
It's
and
out
it's
there.
not distracting you, and that's the other part is
Exactly.
that,
Exactly.
you have one bad experience with a Scotch, let's just say you do pick up a peated, and they have non-peated a flavor profile somewhere, but
Yeah.
I didn't like peat, and I'm not gonna like this distillery now, and so it sorta hides that, and in a good way, not in a bad way,
Yeah.
because
No,
you're
not
trying
at
to
all.
illustrate this, and then for the bourbon fan, the fact that these are at a cask strength is
Yes.
another plus for us because, you know, I had while I was talking to her, I had some Macallan and it was 80 proof or 90 proof, 86 proof or whatever, and it was like I could drink that all night long after spending the weekend before drinking a bunch of barrel proof whiskeys, right?
Right.
And we tend to kind of skew in that direction of things that are maybe overproofed or whatever.
Yeah, that's that, the really cool thing about a single cask of anything is I like to look at it as there are so many different opportunities to enjoy that whiskey in so many different ways, right? So you can have it neat at cask strength, end of the week, you want it at cask strength, whatever the case is, but then, maybe the next time you try it, you're like, you know what? I want to see what this is like with just a few drops of
Yep.
water. And you put a few drops of water in, it's going to change completely.
It
And,
allows me to
maybe the
control if I want to proof it down or not myself.
Exactly. And
Yep.
you really get to tailor it to your liking, right? You can toss it in a cocktail, you can mix it with your sweet tea or whatever, however it is you want to enjoy
Mhm.
it. You have it in its most concentrated, like purest form. And it is up to you, the person who is enjoying it, to go out and find the best ways to do that.
I'm going to tell you that this first bottle,
Yeah, let's talk
thoroughly
about
en
it.
I thoroughly enjoy this. So I've got these other 2 that I purchased a year and a half ago, and they're both 8-year expressions, and one of them is from, you guys had the Whiskey Festival 2021. I picked up one of the bottles from the Whiskey Festival
Okay.
2021, and I
Yeah.
really liked it. It's got a little spice, but this could be easily confused in the bourbon territory because it feels like very dark and rich and brown sugary and
Yes.
if I were to I like Flying United because they give stroop waffles, and I don't know if you've enjoyed stroop waffles,
Yep.
but I love
I'm
those
very
things.
familiar.
But if you were to take a stroop waffle and like put it in a skillet with some brown butter and warm it up and then eat it, that's what I feel like this. And I don't know if that's the right
Oh my
flavor profile,
gosh.
but like the
That
depth
is
and richness is where
an
I enjoy
amazing
this.
tasting note. I love that so much. I think, and that is how I love hearing people talk about whiskey, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's, yes, I'm getting like some tannins or some vanilla or some caramel, but like I like it when people are telling me a story about their tasting notes, just like that. Like, this is like if you X, Y, and Z. And like that to me is that is what I want to hear every single time
Mhm.
somebody talks about a whiskey. So please continue on that path.
But that's the only way I can, because the other side of it is I get doing the things that we do, and you come across people, and you get these really esoteric notes that maybe no one's ever had. Currant fruit, they've had currant jelly,
Yeah,
like red currants. Red currants is a note that everybody uses all the time, but there's not a ton of things in the United States where you can actually get real currants. You get
yeah,
currant jelly. So if you give the
yeah,
note, that's the only point of reference they have, and I've never had one either. If you give a note that someone doesn't know, it doesn't connect with them. But if you can tell them how it makes you feel, it does. And
yeah,
that's, I've done
absolutely.
some bourbon tastings with friends, and that's what I try to communicate. I'm like, what you taste is what you taste, right? You're drawing from a memory. And if I just simply say bananas, um, what you can hear is banana runts. You could hear an unripe banana. You could
Yeah,
taste an overripe banana. You could taste banana pudding. Those are all different, unique versions of banana that all have
yep,
very, very different flavor profiles. And so it doesn't make sense to me just to give you a single flavor. It's tell you how it makes me feel, and
yeah.
that's all I
I
can
love
do.
that. Yeah, I love that. So this particular bottle, so this is from a distillery that I think is of the many, many, many distilleries we bottle from. I think that our single cask from this distillery are just always exceptional. I have not
Hmm.
had a cask from this distillery that I've just been like, meh. I think they're absolutely stunning, and I think this distillery as a whole is quite underrated. I think it is looked down upon sometimes because of the price point. And what's beautiful about this distillery, outside of what we do, is it gives the consumer a great opportunity to learn without breaking the bank.
The bank.
You can
Yep.
go and pick up many different, because this distillery does beautiful cask finishes and they're at a great price. And so you can go and pick up 5 different whiskeys and 5 different cask finishes and essentially like train your palate, right?
Hmm.
You can expose your palate to what port is like, or what Chardonnay, finish is like, or like a peat finish is like, or, standard bourbon. Like you can totally expose your whole palate to that. And I think that is so valuable for people who are really like into this, who really
Hmm.
want to learn. But this particular cask is really beautiful. And the fact that it's at what 64.9% ABV
Right.
doesn't hurt.
No, it doesn't hurt, and it allows, it's high enough proof that I'm not going to want to drink it all night long at that proof
Right.
particularly, but I can have a few drinks, then I can move on to something else, and so
Yeah.
I can stretch this bottle for a period of time because of the proof that it's at, and that's it's always great. Maybe that's part of the mystique for bourbon geeks at having things at a cask proof, is that we can stretch it out a little longer because
Yeah.
it's higher proof or whatever. Like
Yeah.
this
I mean,
is, yeah, of the scotches that um, I've had a couple that were somebody who really, really likes Scotch had some, old stuff sitting around that you can't ever find anywhere ever again. And so those were, like amazing things to have, but it's not worth talking about because you can't find them. Right.
right.
This, if it's attainable, is fantastic.
Yeah, this whiskey is really fantastic. This is
Mhm.
the third time now this week that I've tasted it, and every time it's just a real joy to drink. But I know you had asked about the tasting notes and
Yep.
the names and all of that, so this is probably a good opportunity to talk a little bit about that. So we have a tasting panel over in the UK. So our spiritual home is in Leith, near Edinburgh in Scotland, and our how we kind of approach things is in like a kind of fun and whimsical way.
Hmm.
And the reason we do that is because, one, we want to make whiskey fun because it should be. And two, we really these tasting notes and the names really just like give your mind permission to just like kind of let loose, right? Like I think
Yep.
sometimes when a lot of people go into like nosing and tasting whiskey, they kind of panic a little, like, oh, what if I don't taste vanilla, or what if I'm not tasting or smelling,
Hmm.
my, grandmother's potpourri or whatever the case is, and you don't have to smell any of that. You can smell what exactly you smell and taste exactly what you taste. And I think these tasting notes just kind of they like
Hmm.
just kind of like wet the brain a little, so to speak, like it wets your palate. Um, So the name of this whiskey, A Quick Witted Dovetail. I'm going to just read the brief tasting notes. So on our website, there are full tasting notes. So notes, from nose, palate,
Yeah.
finish with water, all on the website. But this says, initially rich and classically sherried, this one evolves into a fruit bomb with cakes and crystallized ginger. And our tasting panel is made up of people all throughout the industry. There's a very famous whiskey writer named Charles McLean, or Charlie McLean. And he's been on our panel for many, many years. And it's, again, just made up of people all throughout the industry, people who have been in the industry for a really long time, people who have been in the industry maybe not a long time, and basically what they do. And this is, don't tell anyone, but this
Okay.
is really
You
the
want me to
job.
stop the recording right now? Is that what I
Yeah,
need to
stop
do?
the recording.
Okay.
This is really the job I'm after, because what they get to do is get together, every week or every other week, and they get to blind taste these cask samples. Right?
What a
Right?
terrible
I
job.
know. Can you imagine just like hanging out with your friends, essentially just blind tasting cask samples? But it is their job to decide what gets bottled for members. And so the whiskey, they don't know what it is or where it's coming from, and it has to pass both the nose and taste test in order for them to say yes, go bottle this for our members. And if they say no, this isn't ready, then it goes back to our warehouse.
Mhm.
So, but it is them who writes these tasting notes, and sometimes you'll read some tasting notes and you'll be like, what the hell are they talking about? What
Yes.
what even
Yes.
is that? I remember one tasting note. I tell the story all the time because it's just weird. I remember one tasting note was like, it tasted of flying saucers, and I was like, okay, kick rocks. Like, you have not tasted a flying saucer. What
Mhm.
is that? But I believe it's a type of candy, or some type of little sweet over in the UK. And
Let me put
that
that
is,
on the
so
list
like,
of
you're
things
gonna
to look up
read
now.
your yeah, so you're gonna, at least that's what somebody told me. So you're gonna have to sometimes Google what some
Yeah.
words mean. But the cool thing about that is you learn. So not only do you get great whiskey, but you get a vocab lesson too.
Yes, absolutely. That's learning about. I'm all about learning about new treats for sure. Like there's a company that does international treats, and every month they send you a different countries, like their
Yeah.
sweet treats or whatever. And so we've been doing that for a while with our kids because we want to taste things from other countries, and so I want to know about these flying saucer candies. Also, if I can get one and try it, and now
Yeah.
I can be that pretentious asshole at the next tasting whenever I come across that flavor. Like, this is flying saucer candies from England, and people are like, that's not even a thing. But nope, it is.
Oh, sometimes I think they're called satellite wafers. Yeah, satellite
Satellite
wafers,
wafers.
flying saucer candies. So, fun fact of the
Okay.
day.
So I just did a thing while you were talking. I poured a little more and I put it in a glass and I sent it downstairs. My wife is not a huge whiskey person, but she likes to give random tasting notes. And so she said this tastes like a barn full of hay that was caught on fire that was also full of apples. Right. And so
I
there's like
love that.
right. So these are the kind of
I
notes that
love
she
that.
gives on a regular basis. And so I tasted it and I was like, I think she might like this one. And that was a positive note.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not so great. Sometimes it's, like a burnt tire or whatever. But yeah, so I can get that because, there's a little richness of char, and there's some apple, and there's
Yeah.
some
That
grassy.
apple,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
like as I'm like kind of
Yep.
digging back into the nose, like I can definitely
Yeah.
get that bright red apple on the
See,
nose,
this
like
is the
the
thing is that
big fruits in
she's
it.
just inherently better at this than I am. I'm sorry, a barn full of apples that was lit on fire. That's the exact term. She corrected me with the text message from
I
downstairs.
love it.
Um, she's inherently better at this, and so is my 8-year-old. Not tasting, just smelling, right? Because that would be
Yeah.
illegal if I let her taste it. But
Right.
oftentimes she'll be like, "Hey, can I smell that?" And we want to demystify because it's not the end of the world. And she was smelling something. It was a toasted bourbon of some type. I don't even remember what it was. And this 8-year-old smells it. She goes, "Hey, this smells like toasted marshmallows and chocolate," and hands it back to me. And I was like, those are two legitimate notes on this, and I've only gotten one of those, and your 8-year-old nose is like, hey, let me nail this right off the bat. But women are inherently better at smelling and tasting than men are. That's okay. It's an evolutionary response. I'm fine with it. This is fine. But yeah, no, this is really, really good, and it's gonna both be great and bad because it's not gonna last as long as I want it to.
Yes, this whiskey is, so we've actually, what we've done is we actually just released this whiskey on Tuesday, in our June outturn, which is essentially our monthly release of different
Mhm,
casks. And the second whiskey that we're going to taste here as well, was also released on Tuesday. And we have bundled these together essentially, um, to, and at a nice little discounted price too. Our director likes to make some fun bundles and throw
mhm,
a little, surprise in there. So these are both available on the website individually or together, in a bundle, and they're fantastic. And again, full U.S. exclusive cask. So from time to time, more so now, just because our membership base here in the U.S. is growing so rapidly,
mhm,
we are getting more and more full U.S. exclusive casks. So a lot of times, when a cask comes through the pipeline from, home base over in the UK, they have to allocate that to other countries, right? To
mhm,
other chapters around the world. And so, sometimes the UK will get maybe hang on to 10 of them, or Scotland will hang on to 10 of them. And then, some will go to Japan, some will go to Australia, some will go to Canada, and then some will come here. And so what's nice is that we get every single bottle of these full US exclusive casks.
mhm.
And like I said, we're seeing more and more of that, which is really, really exciting, because our members are awesome.
Right. Yeah. So
Yep.
you said that it's growing pretty rapidly here, and not necessarily specific numbers, but how long have you guys been active in the United States specifically? Was this
Oh, that's
before
a great,
you? Go ahead.
before me, yes, before
Okay.
me. It was actually owned by family in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I've only been with the company for on and off for about 4 years. Um, and so yeah, it was well before me that the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society actually came to America. But we started over in the UK in the early 80s. Our founder, Pip Hills, basically had a thing. He just liked whiskey. And, at the time in the 80s, people weren't really drinking single malts. They were
Right.
drinking blends, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's some, still to this day, I don't know why blends get such a bad rap, because there's so many beautiful blended whiskeys out there. We actually do some blended whiskeys from time to time too.
Hmm.
But at the time, nobody was really drinking single malts, and he purchased a cask of whiskey from the very first distillery we ever bottled from, and he shared it with his friends. And like you and I know, we have tons of whiskey in our house. Our friends
Right.
always want to be here and
Yep.
to drink whiskey because like we're better than any bar in town, right?
Right.
Um, so can you imagine if you just had a single cask of whiskey sitting in your house? Like your friend group would just
It.
grow.
I don't know that I don't know that my family would be okay with that. I would have to like build a separate hut to the house.
Right? Yeah.
We've got a shop out back. I might have to turn that into a legitimate whiskey hut because I have some
Yeah,
friends that might never leave ever.
exactly. So Pip, that's how Pip kind of, started, and that friend group just continued to grow. And he's like, I think I'm kind of onto something here, to put it plainly. And he started the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and we're all over the world now, in chapters all over the world, and it's a it's a really awesome thing to be a part of, not
Mhm.
just for the fact that you're part of this global organization of whiskey spies,
Right.
um, but that you're having access to this whiskey that you're not going to find otherwise,
Mhm.
from to distilleries that you're not going to be able to enjoy a lot of times otherwise. And I think that's a really special thing. And I think what's special about what we do is we do try to like take away all of that like uppity, kind of
Pomp and circumstance. The
snobby
yes.
likeness that
Yes.
can sometimes be associated with Scotch whiskey. And we just want whiskey to be fun and enjoyed and shared, and we
It's
want to
not
teach
just
people
Scotch.
about it along the way.
It's bourbon too. Bourbon is the
Yeah,
same way. I was at a
I don't.
podcast
That's not my
event and
world, so I didn't want to speak on it.
no. You're not. It's the same people, just with different backgrounds. Is what it realistically is, right? Like the people who are in bourbon likely started off in bourbon. The people who are in Scotch started off in Scotch, but they're the exact same person. I was at a podcast event couple weeks ago, and there was a bunch of people tasting a bunch of really random bourbons that you can't find anywhere. And everybody's walking around with their nose deep in a glass, and they're talking about the notes. And I looked at another guy, I was like, you realize how pretentious as shit everything we're doing is right now. Like, this is just pretentious, and it's okay. We are,
Yeah.
you catch yourself accidentally smelling your water at the end of the day.
Right.
But it can get that way real fast, especially whenever you have labels. You go to a bottle share, the intent is, I've got to bring a bottle that is above someone else's. And that's
You have to like one up somebody
yeah,
essentially.
but it's a
Yeah.
barrier to entry for new people who don't know anything about, like for me, for Scotch, I don't know what is good and bad. Like, I could go and read a ton of blog posts or watch YouTube videos, or I can learn it, but learning it is not tasting it. And I gave you this story earlier, but I distinctly remember the first time that I went to a pharmacy to pick up tampons for my girlfriend. I was like, I don't know what to buy, because this is a brand new segment for me. I have to figure out what's good and what's not. I got to seek advice or whatever. But this just sort of, strips it down and takes away any labels. And it just tells me on the front of it what I should expect from this particular experience, which I guess in that scenario still wouldn't have helped me immensely, but
Right.
it would have at least demystified some of it. And so that's what's super appreciative for people who are just entering, at least in my mindset. And then for the advanced person, the person who's been into whiskey for a while, it gets them out of their own head, because you get this mindset, I've got to buy a certain thing.
Right. And you don't. And I think too, sometimes feel, well, I'm just getting into whiskey, or I'm just getting into Scotch. And, sometimes you see an ABV like the one we're enjoying now at almost 65%. And that's like, that's going to be like straight up gasoline. Like, I don't want that. But, to go back to what I was saying before, the beautiful thing about that is that you get to tailor it to your liking.
Right.
So, if you want it at 40% ABV, then, proof it down, add enough water to get to that, ABV that you're comfortable with and you enjoy it most at. And then, maybe a month later, as you're a month into your journey, you're adding less water. And, maybe the next month you're like, you know what, I just want this neat. So,
but if you had a label with a name on it, and there's the pretentious guy sitting across the room, and you start trying to proof down what is effectively a $300 Scotch, they're gonna start to freak out. But you don't know what this is. And that's what makes it great.
Right. And don't freak out. Look, I cannot like stress this enough to people when getting into whiskey is enjoy it how you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I mean that wholeheartedly. Like, this is a hill I'm willing to die on this hill. Please enjoy whiskey however it is you enjoy it. If you want to add ice to it, add ice. If you want to add water, add water. If, like I said, mix it with your sweet tea or make a cocktail or put it in your coffee, however it is you enjoy it, please do that. The only thing I ever recommend to people is just try it neat first. Just try it. You don't have to like it. Whatever the case is, just try it neat first and then have at it.
Even at that point, if you're putting it in a cocktail, trying it neat first lets you understand how it's impacting the cocktail you're drinking, right? Like, what is it bringing to the party? Because hopefully it's not just bringing to the party alcohol, because if it's bringing alcohol, you can do that with PGA or vodka or something that doesn't have a flavor, right? There's a flavor that whoever crafted that cocktail wants to get in there. You can explore that. You can find that out, and you might end up trying something you like, or maybe you say, no, I still can't drink this straight,
Yeah, but I love it in a cocktail.
Right. And that's okay. But for
it is okay.
For the people in certain circles, it's just not okay. It's just not, how could you ever do this?
We encourage people to enjoy it however it is they want to enjoy it.
All right. So we're pouring the next one here. Burnt dust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it. Burnt dust.
All right. So while I'm pouring this, is it whiskey only? Is this all you guys do is whiskey, or is there other spirits that you're involved with?
There are other spirits that you will see from time to time. We do gin, single cask gin. So if you are a fan of gin and tonics or just gin in general, our single cask gins are absolutely stunning. They're just a total different beast. And they're really beautiful. And so we try to release those a couple times a year. I think we have one coming up in the fall, early fall, which will be pretty exciting. So we do that. We do rum, single cask rum. And from time to time, you'll see an Armagnac, a cognac. think that's all for the spirit side.
Mhm.
And
So
then
with gin, is that all still coming from England, or are you picking it from all across the world whenever you start talking about gin?
it can come from anywhere that
Okay.
gin is made.
Okay.
So yeah.
And
All right.
so
So the
your
first,
Scotch malt. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, sorry.
No, you.
I just was gonna make a quick note. So the first whiskey that we tasted was in our deep, rich, and dried fruits
Hmm.
flavor profile. So it has this dark kind of red
Yep.
label on our topper on it. The next whiskey we're gonna have is in our peated flavor profile. So this is a peated whiskey.
I was getting ready to ask
And
because I smelled it and I was like, I think
yes,
there may be peat here. So I've
there
got
is
I've
a
got a
little
green
peat in
one.
this.
I've got a dark red. Is this dark? I'm not good with colors. You said dark red or
Yeah,
an orange burnt color?
it's a burnt orangey red.
I also have a light purple and a dark purple. Are the ones that I had before
Okay,
this
so
thing
I
came
think
in.
you have a young and you could have a sweet, fruity, and mellow, and a spicy and sweet are probably what you have.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's
again,
probably correct because so the spicy and sweet connects on the one that is the Whiskey Festival 2021. I think that sounds
okay.
right because is a darker purple, but it doesn't have because it doesn't have all of the same stuff on the front of the label
Yeah.
because it has that celebration
Yep.
design that's on it
Yep.
or
That's
whatever.
a spicy and sweet.
Yeah, it's really good. I like that one too. All right, so
Yeah.
we're talking peated now.
We're talking peat now. So typically, peat, you hear just the word peat and you will automatically think Isla. In Scotland, your Lafroigs, your Lagavulins, your Ardbegs, your,
Hmm.
some Brooklades and Bunas, peated versions of those. But this is actually from Speyside. This is a peated Speyside whiskey from a really just, this distillery just makes beautiful whiskey. And if you are trying to get into the peated category, or you're just kind of getting your toes wet and you've maybe tried one that was too much and you want to kind of dial it back, I think that a lot of peated Speyside whiskeys just offer a very different experience. The profile of peated or mainland peated whiskey versus an island peated whiskey are
Hmm.
very different. So this
Yeah,
one is,
it definitely didn't hit me. So I've got a 10-year Ardbeg over here. And some
yes,
days it's great, and some days it's a Band-Aid. It just depends on what the day is for me.
right.
And there's a distinct difference in the peat smell that
Yeah.
comes across, and it's appreciated by me, not necessarily would it be, maybe by somebody who's a strong peat head. Uh, so peat is usually measured in ppm, is that right?
PPMs, correct.
Okay,
Yes.
and do you guys
Um,
have the ppm on this, or is it
yeah.
does it
So
even
this,
matter?
yeah. So this particular distillery typically is in that 10 to 20 ppm
Hmm.
range. I don't know the exact number on this particular bottle,
Right.
but I do know that this particular distillery stays in that 10 to 20 type of range. So it's not going to be
Hmm.
super intense and like kind of punch you in the face like something like a
Yeah, it's definitely not
Ardbeg
doing that.
or Lagavulin or Octomore.
Right.
So
Yeah. I've been
yeah,
to the Lagavulins and the Ardbegs. I haven't hit an Octomore yet. But so if we were talking about these parts per million, does it start at 0 and go up to whatever, or like, how does that work? Or
it does go up to whatever. And so, you have some Octomores that I think the highest was in the 300 range, I want to say. But a lot of distilleries are typically in that 10 to 20, 30, 40 type of range that we see kind of on the shelves.
Mhm.
It's really the Octomores that you see in those 100, 200. I think 304 maybe was the highest they got to. I can't remember off the top of my head, but two, the funny thing about that is, you'll have an Octomore sometimes, and it is just the most soft, delicate,
Mhm.
integrated peat that you've ever tasted. And you're like, wait a second, how is this the most heavily peated whiskey in the world when I'm not like dying right now?
Right,
you
right.
know? Then sometimes you'll have a whiskey that's at 20 or 30, 40 ppm, and you're like, holy cow, like this is like
Mhm.
just total punch of peat to the face. And so I don't know if the number, at least for me, I don't let the number catch me up, so to speak. And I don't put expectations on a number to deliver something when You just really don't know what you're going to get until you taste it.
Right. It's a guideline that might tell you something, but it
Right.
can still completely depart from that,
Absolutely.
no matter what. And so, are you a peated whiskey person, or are you
Oh,
just
yes.
okay? So this is
Yes.
a thing for you.
Yes, I do. I do love peated whiskey. I love young peated whiskey,
Mhm.
and I just they're just a lot of fun to experience
So what
because
does young peated whiskey give you that? And I guess what is young? What is young for you when
yeah.
you say
So
young
like
peated?
I mean anywhere from 5, 6, 7, 8 year old peated
Hmm.
whiskey. I really love just young, robust, powerful peated whiskeys just because it's such an intense experience.
Hmm.
Typically, when you have peated whiskeys that are older, I'm talking you're 20 plus or 16 plus, the peat definitely has a tendency to soften a bit. And I just love that like very aggressive style of peat.
Hmm.
So that's why I typically gravitate toward younger peated whiskeys.
And I have to
Although
catch
I'll
myself
happily
asking
drink an
what
old
young
one.
Yeah, I have to catch myself asking what old and young means, because in the bourbon world, old is very different than in the Scotch world,
Right,
right? And young is very
right.
different, because young whiskey is 2 years old in the bourbon world, whereas Scotch, you're given 5, 7, and that's what a lot of bourbons sell at to begin with. That 5 to 7 is
Yeah,
kind of their magical range, and so it has to do with the casks and the way they're used. And I like sort of understand the science as much as a like non-sciencey person can understand the science of what's happening here.
right.
Um, but without like talking about any direct tasting notes, this is not one that I feel like punches me in the face with smoke or peat or whatever. I've had
Yeah.
some some whiskeys that were made here in the United States, some American single malts that have been smoked using mesquite that are
Yep.
way more aggressive than this.
Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely on the softer side. And what I really love about mainland style peat is it's a little more like earthy and woodsy,
Hmm.
whereas like island or Isla style peat is more like maritime. So you get like that briny, like iodine type of like creepy hospital taste. Whereas,
Yep.
in mainland style peat, it's just more like warm and woodsy and earthy. And I think it just it makes for beautiful whiskey.
Yeah, because anytime I smell peat, I immediately expect that I'm going to get the tasting note of Band-Aid, and not like
Yep.
the not the fabric Band-Aid, but the plasticky ones. Like that's the
Hmm.
specific Band-Aid that it is. But this doesn't carry that as severely for me. And I see one of the notes on here is red licorice, and I don't get that at all, which is a positive because I'm not a huge licorice fan to begin with.
Yeah, this one says toasted grains, burnt bread joined, smoked fish, and chimney soot. Then dark treacle, red licorice, and spicy flowers. There's like
Why
a
is
nice
somebody drinking chimney soot though? I need to talk to that person
see.
about their life
Okay, but like
choices.
this, but like that's what I love about whiskey,
Yeah.
right? Is that you can take something like because I remember when I first got into whiskey, I did not like peat.
Hmm.
And I would read like reviews and tasting notes from people. And I'm like, who the hell in their right mind would want to, like you said, drink Band-Aids?
Right.
Like, what has to happen where you're like, I really could go for some Band-Aids today,
Right.
But now, when I find that tasting note, I'm like, ooh, little Band-Aid, I like it.
Hmm.
And it's just even though it sounds off-putting
It
or
doesn't have to
like
be, and that's
crazy, right?
a couple of years ago. A friend shared some whiskey with me, and the first tasting note, or for this first smell and tasting note that I got off of it was, and I don't think you're old enough to maybe know this, but in the '80s there was a very distinct leather shoe smell that existed for basketball shoes. Right, it was the white leather that all original Jordans or Nike pumps or any of those things that happened in the '80s. They had a very distinct smell to them, and that's what this
Okay,
flavor was. And it was a good solid reminiscent memory for me. He was a little
right,
older than I was, and he didn't like that smell or taste, right? And that's not
right.
what he got. And so when I said it, it was insulting to him. It's the same thing as being like, "Oh, this tastes like Band-Aids." And some people are like, "That's a terrible thing." It can be, but
Sure.
not for everybody. It doesn't have to be that way.
But so can red licorice, right?
right.
Some people are like, "Ugh, red licorice, like I'm definitely not tasting that."
Yeah.
I hate
Well,
that stuff.
I don't like red licorice, and I don't get that in this flavor profile. Well, I don't like most licorice at all. It's that's that downfall. Like I want to like absinthe, but I just can't,
Yeah.
because that's a distinct flavor. There's a couple of distillers here in the United States that they're really getting into making absinthe, and I respect them, and I have an opportunity to go visit with them, and I really want to like it because they're going through the whole thing, and they're putting it in the machine that drops it over the sugar cube, and it
Yep.
chills it down, and it makes and I'm like, I want to be, it's like Japanese tea. I want to be a part of it. I just don't like what comes out the other end of it.
Right.
And
And
that's
that's okay,
terrible
but
because of
that's
liquor.
okay. Like you could respect it and you can respect the
Right.
craft. It doesn't mean you have to partake in it.
Oh, I mean, I'll drink it. I absolutely, because I've drank worse things. I mean, like I went to college. I've drank way worse things, but it's just not something that I prefer.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that like some people just don't like peat at all, and that's cool.
Hmm.
For me, like when I first got into it and I tasted, my first peated whiskey, and that's when I was like, I can't, why would somebody torture themselves with drinking this? And I was like, but if I'm going to be a part of this community and I'm going to learn as much as I can about whiskey, like I have to get to the point where I can at least taste it, just for my own knowledge, right? And so
Hmm.
I had a bottle in the house. My husband like bought off a bar program and from a friend who's closing his bar down and brought all these bottles home, and this happened to be one of the bottles. And I remember I was like, I cannot drink this. So like I would be like vacuuming the house or whatever, and I would see that bottle and I would just take a swig of it. And I'd be like, God, this is awful. And I would put it back and I would just keep vacuuming. But I just like kept at it and I just kept exposing my
Conditioning.
palate to it. Yeah, basically. And then the whiskey that totally just blew my mind when it came to peat was an Octomore. I had an Octomore in a Reef salt cask that I tasted. And I was like, this is probably one of the most incredible things I have ever tasted in my life. And it just totally opened my mind, to the world of peat. But had I not really, like you said, conditioned my palate before then, I don't know if I would have had that same experience. So
Right. Did you say
yeah,
reef salt?
Reef salts,
Okay.
Rivesaltes.
I thought you said reef salt, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to find out about that and like what's going on with that. But yeah, it's in the same way. If you're gonna spend a night tasting cask strength whiskey, you probably need to drink something before you start. Maybe a 90 or 100
Wet your
proof
palate.
whiskey to
Yeah.
to get you up to speed. Because if the first thing you do is drink a hazmat whiskey, you're not gonna like it probably.
Yeah, there's a good chance that it will definitely hit a little different.
Hmm.
And, that's also the thing about, whiskey just in general, that some days you'll taste things and you'll be like, you know what, I don't enjoy this today. But maybe the next week when you taste it, you'll be like, this is the greatest thing ever. Our palates are always evolving, and some days they like to take a day off too, I like to say. And they're not
Hmm.
working as maybe we would expect. So I'll always try it at least 2 to 3 times. Any whiskey, that
That
at least.
I'm on the rule of three. That I always
Yeah,
live on the rule of three, and the three tastings need to be. If I like it immediately, I'm not as worried about it. But if I dislike a thing, I want to wait a week, at least a week, and try it again, because there's a number of things like, what did I eat today? What was my mood like? What
yep,
is the temperature outside? Like, there's so many things that can impact whether I like a thing or not.
absolutely.
And there's so many things that can impact that make me not like something.
Sure.
I had a terrible day at work, and it really doesn't matter what I drink. I was just gonna hate it because I was just filled with hate from work. Sometimes things happen. So I try to make sure it's a rule of three here. So the notes are in from the downstairs
Okay.
people, right? So
Yep.
this is a bar of Irish Spring that was used 20 years ago and found in an abandoned house. So a
These
musty
tastings
Irish Spring
are
bar.
amazing. We need to hire her.
Hey, look, she's for hire. She's got an English literature background, so she's really good with words.
Oh my
She's
gosh, these
significantly
are so
smarter and more
brilliant.
artistic than I am. Um, but
I
but
love,
I get the mustiness.
she's
I
like
get.
spot on. Dang, I
I'll
love that
make sure and let
so
her know.
much.
Yeah. I told her, I was like, you can come on and join me in any of these, but she's not interested in that. She's like, this is a thing you
No, that
do. Leave me out of this.
she can send those tasting notes
But yeah,
from, yeah, that's brilliant. Spot on.
yeah. This is, and I get the mustiness, and I get the fresh soap. I don't want to use soap because it can have a negative connotation. I like
Right.
this
It's just clean.
better than a lot of peated. Yeah, clean, yes, perfect, clean,
Yeah.
clean and musty at the same time, which is
Yeah.
a unique
And
thing that exists here.
a vintage bar of soap that's been found in an abandoned house. I mean, that is like spot on.
Yeah, yeah. No, so she'll
That's
be
it.
super happy to have that. So you've been with this company, you said off and on for 4 years. Like, what makes you
Just
want to
about,
work
yeah.
here? Like, what makes you want to work for Scotch and Malt Whiskey Society?
Just the fact that I get to every day wake up and learn about all of whiskey. Like I'm
Hmm.
encouraged to go out and learn everything I can about every whiskey that's out there. Whether it's a American single malt, a Canadian whiskey, an Irish whiskey, a Scotch whiskey, to learn about maturation and all of the different types of incredible casks that are out there. Like the fine, nerdy little details to
Hmm.
maybe not the details that are as important, but I get to go out and I'm encouraged and supported to go and learn all of that. And I think that's really special. And rare in a lot of cases for people who do something like I do. And then not only do I get to go out and learn all of this stuff, I get to sit down with people like you and talk about it and
Hmm.
talk to our members on the phone almost every day, or whether it's through email or seeing them in person when we do in-person events. And it's just a really beautiful circle of things that all come together to create just this amazing experience of being part of this team. And we're a really small team here in the
Hmm.
US, and we work really hard to, just keep what we do as personal as possible. I mean, we're a members club at the end of the day, and
Hmm.
it's important to let our members know that they're seen, they're heard, and we're here to help however we can. And we want to share all of the knowledge that we have with our members. And I just think there's no one else doing what we're doing. And I just think that is a really, really cool thing.
So you said
So to be a
in-person
part of that,
events, right? So
yes,
you said in-person events. What do you guys
I was
do
getting all
in-person events? What
sentimental.
is it? Oh no, it's yeah. I cut you off. That was really rude.
No,
I'm
no,
not.
not
I'm
at all.
so sorry about that. Yeah, you
I
just
get,
called
I
me
get,
on it.
I'll get all in my feels about this. Yes. So for our outturns, which again, essentially are our monthly releases of cask, we will do what's called an in-person outturn preview tasting. So we actually do this in two ways. So the first and third Tuesday of every month is when we are releasing our outturns. The
Mhm.
first Tuesday is typically a much larger outturn. This last one, we released 13 different casks. And then our mid-month, or that second outturn of the month, is a lot smaller, maybe 5, 6 casks. But the Monday nights before our releases, or sometimes Sunday nights, depending on which city you're in, we will do an in-person outturn preview tasting where you get to come and taste the whiskey ahead of time before it gets released. And we try to get to as many cities as humanly possible.
Mhm.
I just actually hosted one here in Atlanta for the first time, which was very exciting. And we typically host in Florida, different cities in Florida, Seattle, Washington, New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, the Bay Area, San Diego. We
Mhm.
try to get to as many places as we can. And it just gives members an opportunity to come together and meet other members, or just people who love whiskey too. You don't have to be a member in order to purchase a ticket to come and enjoy the whiskey. And you get to come and we taste them blind, actually, which is
Oh wow.
really, yes, it's
Mhm.
so much fun. And I always tell people, ahead of time, look, blind tasting is hard no matter what. Like
Yep.
whether you're blind tasting like soda or, different
Yep.
milk percentages or like whatever.
Right.
Just blind tasting in general is difficult. But to blind taste single cask whiskey is incredibly difficult.
Oh yeah.
And so don't put pressure on yourself. It's literally just for fun and to like basically break the ice. Um, and then we go through and we blind taste 6 different whiskeys at these events, and it's the whiskeys that are coming out, in the outturn, and they're a lot of fun. And so we always keep that on our events page on our website at smwsa.com. And then for those who aren't able to attend or make it to an in-person outdoor preview tasting on YouTube, we host, on Monday nights. It's like myself and Scott, who is part of the Real Scotch Test Dummies. He's also on our team, and so it'll be him and me or Ben or whoever on the team. And then sometimes we'll pull in people from the whiskey community to come and do those out turns as well. And we'll be on YouTube tasting through that same selection of whiskeys and sharing the full out turn of everything that's coming out the next day.
So, and then another feature, and maybe I read this wrong, but if you happen to be in England, right, there's a potential to have access to members' rooms. Is that a thing?
Yes. So we have members' rooms over in the UK. We have members' rooms in Glasgow, London, Edinburgh, and then our spiritual home, the Vault, in Leith. And members do have access to those rooms, and they can bring, friends, colleagues, loved ones, in with them. The only thing what I always like to recommend to people is if you are going to be over there, visiting any of our members' rooms over there, just reach out to us and let us know. We'll connect you with the team out there and make sure you have the best experience possible. But they're beautiful and so much fun, and this is like nothing compared to what they have in those members' rooms. So members do have full access to those as well.
So are we gonna get a stateside members room someday?
Maybe, yeah. The laws here in the U.S. are a little different, than they are in the rest of the world. But we'll see what happens. Yeah.
So basically, if we get past our puritanistic ways, maybe we'll be able to look at something like that. There's some restrictive legislation that is in place. One of the other things, and I don't remember seeing the last one that came through, but you guys put out a magazine.
Yes.
Do we still do the magazine? The first one that I got, the first one I ever got.
Maybe I have one.
This is as good, if not better, than many of the magazines that I just get, right? Like, we have a Whiskey Advocate, and we have, Newsweek or National Geographic. Like this is really nice. Like, it's really, really, really nice.
So every month, it's called Unfiltered, and it's actually digital now. So everything it gets released. We send the email out. Only members have access to it. And so we release this every month. And then at the end of the year, you get this version, which is like a nice coffee table style version of it. And it has So you'll get this version at the end of the year. And look, there's my Malt Whiskey Yearbook of 2020. That was with it.
There you go.
So that is also one of the perks of being a member, and it's just full of good stories and whiskey knowledge, and up and coming distilleries, and things like that, which is really cool. So that is also a member perk.
I didn't know what to expect whenever I joined. I just saw what you guys were about, and I was like, I've wasted more money on worse things, so let's see what this is about. And when it showed up, I was like, oh, this is going to be like a catalog trying to sell things.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And so I was like, well, now I'm actually like having to read this like a real magazine. And that was a really nice twist that I didn't expect to be there.
Yeah. You sit back with a glass of whiskey and read through it. It is quite nice. It's definitely something I look forward to every month is reading through, all of the different stories, and kind of gives you some sneak peeks as to maybe what's to come as far as different distilleries that we're going to be bottling from. So it's a lot of fun to read through.
Okay, so I think I've got all the questions that I had have been answered, and I hope that you've covered what you wanted to. If not, you've got an opportunity to add this here.
Well, I do want to let anyone know who is listening and is not a member and would like to become a member. We are currently running a promotion that if you do gift a membership, you do get a little gift card for yourself to either put towards a membership or a bottle if you are already a member. But if you do want to become a member, please do make sure that you definitely let us know that the Embellished podcast sent you our way. And we will be sure to send you a $50 gift card to use in the shop as well to put towards your first purchase.
Yep, and that's how I got in the first time. It was absolutely an offer like that where I was going to get $50 back, and I took that $50 and I put it towards the first bottle, and so
Yep.
was able to get a few things. And I was like, well, I'm getting one, might as well get two because I've already got $50 off, and so it was a really really nice addition. It helps you kind of get into it, and it's I thoroughly enjoy what I have. Sometimes I'm reluctant to buy more because I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but this is the most approachable packaging that you can come across for someone who is brand new to a particular
Yeah.
segment.
Yeah. And what's really cool too about what we do is, if maybe you don't know where to start, or maybe you've had some whiskeys in the past that you really love and you're like, well, where do I go from there? Call us. It'll be myself or, a number of my colleagues that pick up the phone. And we're always happy to kind of walk you through how the shop works, how the flavor profiles work.
Mhm,
Maybe what some good recommendations would be, like typically if you're coming from the bourbon world, we can kind of walk you through all the flavor profiles that
mhm,
maybe you'll find in bourbon. And we're always happy to talk to people on the phone and walk them through this whole process. um, as far as recommendations or answering any questions that you have. So please don't be shy and email us. You can email me, you can email my
mhm.
colleagues. Give us a call. We're always happy to help.
Yeah, and I don't know too many people in the whiskey hobbies that are incredibly shy, but I think many of them probably don't reach out because they assume that that's just marketing talk and that people are not going to
No.
actually do it. And I've already had three other conversations with people who are like, "No, I ask questions all the time. I get information. That's how I'm able to decide where to kind of go to next." And so
Yeah.
where a lot of companies say they do the things you guys actually do, and you're crafting a membership experience for people that is truly that. I mean, like it's a legitimate club. It's not a business, so to speak. It doesn't have the feeling of a business, right? You guys have to make money to stay open, but
Sure. But
there's a
at the
connection
end
to
of the
people that
day,
exists.
right. And at the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of people who love whiskey,
Hmm.
and we love to nerd out like everyone else and talk about it and share it and, share tasting notes and recommendations, just like we would with friends, right? So when you
Yes.
call, it's just like calling a friend and like, Jenna, what what do I do? Like, where do I go from here? I really love this whiskey. Um, what's the next step basically?
Right.
And always happy to assist and help however we can.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me tonight.
Yeah.
We're gonna close out the episode here. I'm
Yeah.
always this is the thing that always sort of shocks me about working in this is that I don't have a huge following. I don't have thousands and thousands of people that follow me, but without a um, with no everyone I've asked to come on and talk to me has said yes. Right. This is a thing that is unique to the whiskey industry, and you guys are straight in the middle of all of that. I've said, hey, I'd like to talk about this just because I want to see what you guys are doing or whatever's going on, and I really really love this about this particular community of people, and you guys are just right a part of that. So I appreciate it. It's fantastic.
Well, we appreciate you, spreading the great gospel of whiskey, so to speak, and asking us to come on. Like
Yeah.
this is what we live for, really.
Yeah.
Moments just like this. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, I'll boot you off. We're gonna close it out, and then we'll chit chat a little bit
Yeah.
afterwards. All right.
I
Thank you.
guess one last thing, if
Yep.
you don't mind, if anybody
Yeah.
does have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm at jenna@smwsa.com, and you are more than welcome to email me at any time. Or you can check out our website at smwsa.com, or follow us on Instagram at smws america and
Yep.
reach out, say hi. So
Yeah.
thank you so
I've got
much
some of
for
those links will be
having
in the
us,
show
John.
notes too. So I'm not gonna put your
Awesome.
email address in there because I don't want somebody to scrub that off and throw it on a bunch of spam lists.
Right.
But the rest of the URLs are on there, so people should be able to find it on both
Super
places. But
awesome.
yeah, absolutely
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in for this offering of the Embellish podcast. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you have to be consuming this on. You can leave a comment if possible. You can hit me up on social media and at Twitter or Instagram at EmbellishPod and give me a follow so you can see what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. I'll be back again next week with another new offering for you. So until then, cheers and thanks for hanging out.